The night sky above Manhattan split open like a wound. It wasn't the gentle shimmer of a portal or the elegant tear of controlled magic. This was violent, a screaming rupture in reality itself that turned the darkness into a kaleidoscope of impossible colors. Lightning that had never touched Earth's atmosphere before cascaded down in emerald and crimson streams, and the sound was like the universe itself was screaming. On the observation deck of Vote Tower, where the Seven gathered for their monthly corporate strategy meeting, Homelander's head snapped toward the window. His perfect smile faltered. Behind those cold blue eyes, something approaching concern flickered for just a moment before his ego reasserted itself. "The fuck is that?" A-Train muttered, his perpetually anxious energy suddenly justified. The rift pulsed once, twice, and then vomited out two figures who plummeted toward the streets below like falling stars. They hit the intersection of 5th Avenue and 53rd Street with enough force to crater the asphalt, sending cars spinning like toys and shattering every window within a 3-block radius. When the dust cleared, two figures rose from the wreckage. The first was a giant of a man, bare-chested save for leather harness and furry shorts that would have been laughable on anyone else. But there was nothing laughable about him. He stood nearly 7 feet tall, muscles carved like granite, holding a broadsword that hummed with power. His long blonde hair framed a face that somehow managed to look both impossibly heroic and genuinely kind. This was not the manufactured heroism of a Vote marketing campaign. This was something ancient, something real. The second figure pulled himself up with a staff topped with a ram's skull that crackled with purple energy. Where the first man radiated nobility, this one exuded menace. His face was literally a skull, blue skin stretched tight over bone, yellow eyes burning with malevolent intelligence. His purple hood and dark armor marked him as clearly as any villain's costume, but there was something about the way he carried himself that suggested he'd earned his evil the hard way, through actual conquest rather than public relations. "Where?" the muscular warrior began, his voice deep and resonant. "Where is Eternia?" The skull-faced sorcerer laughed, a sound like bones rattling in a crypt. "You fool! Your interference with my dimensional transporter has stranded us in... He looked around at the gleaming skyscrapers, the panicking civilians filming everything on their phones, the distant sound of sirens. "Somewhere primitively advanced." "Skeletor," the warrior growled, raising his sword. "Whatever world this is, your evil ends here." "My evil? You destroyed the gateway, He-Man. If anyone should answer for this dimensional catastrophe, it's..." Whatever Skeletor was about to say was cut off by a sonic boom. Homelander landed between them with his signature superhero pose, fists on hips, cape billowing dramatically despite the lack of wind, that million-dollar smile plastered across his face. Behind him, the rest of the Seven descended with varying degrees of dramatic flair. Queen Maeve looked bored. The Deep was clearly terrified. Black Noir was Black Noir. "Gentlemen," Homelander's voice carried that perfect blend of authority and friendliness that focus groups had determined played best with Middle America. "I'm going to need you to power down whatever cosplay convention brought you here and come with us peacefully. We don't want anyone getting hurt." He-Man and Skeletor both turned to stare at him. "This world has heroes?" He-Man's expression brightened with hope. "Then perhaps heroes?" Skeletor's laugh cut through the night like a knife. His mystical senses, honed by decades of studying the darkest magics of Eternia, were screaming at him. He could feel it, the wrongness radiating from these so-called champions. The blue-eyed one especially reeked of barely controlled psychosis, wrapped in a flag. "Oh, He-Man, I don't think these are the heroes you're hoping for." Homelander's smile tightened just a fraction. "Listen, Skeletor the rejected Halloween costume. I'm America's #1 hero. I've got a 94% approval rating. So when I tell you freaks to stand down, you..." He-Man's sword was at Homelander's throat before anyone could blink. Not touching, not threatening. Just there. A statement. "I am He-Man, Prince Adam of Eternia, defender of Castle Grayskull, and champion of the Elders," he said quietly, and there was steel in his voice that made even Homelander pause. "I do not know what manner of champion you claim to be, but where I come from, heroes do not threaten first, and ask questions never." For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. Then Homelander's eyes began to glow red. "Oh," Skeletor said with genuine delight. "This is going to be entertaining." The laser vision that could cut through steel, that had vaporized terrorists and inconvenient witnesses, that was Homelander's ultimate answer to any problem. It splashed harmlessly against He-Man's raised sword. The power sword, forged by the Elders themselves, absorbed the energy and reflected it back, sending Homelander tumbling through the air. "By the power of Grayskull!" He-Man's voice echoed across Manhattan, and his sword blazed with ancient magic. "I will not allow innocent people to be caught in this battle. Skeletor, truce until we understand this world." Skeletor considered for exactly 1 second. Agreed. These pretenders need to be taught what real power looks like. If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in down in the comments below. This is going to be one hell of a ride. Queen Maeve stepped forward, her expression calculating. Unlike Homelander, she'd actually been in real fights before Volt sanitized her image, and every instinct she'd honed in those bloody early days was screaming at her that these two were legitimately dangerous. "Homelander," she said carefully, "maybe we should..." But Homelander was already charging back, his ego more wounded than his body. He'd never been challenged like this. Never. Everyone either loved him or feared him, and this barbarian with a sword had just embarrassed him in front of cameras that were broadcasting this worldwide. He-Man caught Homelander's punch with one hand. Just caught it. The punch that could shatter concrete, that had put holes through armored vehicles, stopped cold in He-Man's palm. "Please," He-Man said, and he actually sounded sad. "I don't want to hurt you." Skeletor's Havoc staff erupted with purple lightning that sent A-Train flying before he could even think about attacking. "How refreshing," the sorcerer cackled. "Actual competence for once. He-Man, these heroes are weaker than Merman." The battle lasted exactly 4 minutes. When it was over, the 7 lay scattered across 5th Avenue. Not dead. He-Man had been careful about that, and even Skeletor had held back from lethal force, more interested in humiliation than murder. Homelander was embedded 3 feet deep in the side of a Starbucks, his suit torn, his hair mussed, his ego shattered into a million pieces. He-Man stood in the center of the crater, chest heaving, looking around at the destruction with genuine horror. This isn't right. Heroes don't fall so easily. What manner of champions are you?" Skeletor was examining his staff thoughtfully, barely winded. "Interesting. Very interesting. He-Man, I don't think we're dealing with actual warriors here. These are..." He sniffed the air, his magical senses probing. "Artificially enhanced, chemically altered, like..." His yellow eyes widened. "Like science pretending to be power." A slow clap echoed from behind them. Both Eternians turned to see a man in a Hawaiian shirt and jeans, flanked by 4 others who looked distinctly unmilitary. The man had a British accent and a smile that was all teeth and murder. "Well, well, fucking well," Billy Butcher said, his grin widening. "Looks like Christmas came early, boys. We got ourselves some genuine soup-killing talent." He-Man's sword remained raised, but his expression was confused rather than hostile. Skeletor, however, had his Havoc staff pointed directly at the newcomers, purple energy crackling around the ram's skull. "Identify yourselves," He-Man commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd actually ruled a kingdom rather than played one on TV. "Are you with these fallen champions?" Butcher's laugh was harsh and genuine. "Champions? Mate, those ain't champions, those are cunts in capes. Vought International's finest corporate cocksuckers, each one more fucked in the head than the last, especially Laser Eyes over there." He jerked his thumb toward where Homelander was pulling himself out of the building, rage making his whole body tremble. "Butcher," Mother's Milk warned, his hand near his weapon. "We don't know what these two can do." "Oh, I know exactly what they can do, MM." Butcher's eyes gleamed with something like religious fervor. "They can do what we've been trying to do for years, put Homelander on his arse." Frenchie was staring at He-Man and Skeletor with the fascination of a man watching his atheism crumble in real time. "Mon Dieu, they are not Supas, not Compound Phi. This is something else entirely. Magic," Skeletor said flatly, lowering his staff slightly but not entirely. His analytical mind was working overtime, processing everything he was seeing and sensing. "This world has no magic, or rather, it did once, but you've buried it under your primitive science. And these Supis you mention, they're chemical enhancements masquerading as genuine power." He tilted his skull face toward Butcher. "You hate them?" "Good. I respect honest hatred." Kimiko signed something rapidly, and Frenchie translated, "She asks if you are gods." He-Man actually looked offended. "No, I'm a man who was given power to protect others. That's all. The elders of Eternia blessed me with strength to defend the innocent and stand against evil." "How disgustingly noble," Skeletor muttered, but there was something almost fond in his tone. The familiarity of an enemy who'd faced that nobility for decades. Then his yellow eyes fixed on Butcher. "You're planning something. I can smell scheming the way a bloodhound smells fear. Speak plainly. What do you want?" Butcher's grin widened. "What do I want? I want to burn Vault to the fucking ground. I want every Supe who's raped, murdered, and destroyed innocent lives to pay for it. And I especially want that star-spangled psychopath over there to learn what it feels like to be powerless." He stepped closer, his intensity radiating like heat. "Question is, are you two going to be problems, or can we work together? Work with villains?" He-Man's grip on his sword tightened. "I've spent my entire life fighting Skeletor's evil. I won't trade one set of monsters for another." "Oh, come off it, you muscled fool," Skeletor snapped, actually turning his back on the boys to face his eternal enemy. "Use that brick you call a head for once. These heroes," he spat the word like poison, "just tried to intimidate us without cause, attacked without provocation. And that blue-eyed maniac radiated more genuine malevolence than half my henchmen combined. Meanwhile, these disheveled vigilantes showed up after the fight and are actually talking. Which group exhibits more honest villainy?" He-Man opened his mouth, closed it, and then looked genuinely troubled. Because Skeletor, damn him, had a point. "The enemy of my enemy," Mother's Milk said carefully, "doesn't have to be my friend, but maybe we cannot kill each other long enough to figure out what the hell just happened here." A sonic boom interrupted the conversation as Homelander rose into the air, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. Blood trickled from his nose, probably the first time he'd bled in years. His eyes were already glowing red again. "You're dead," he said, his voice stripped of all media-friendly warmth. This was the real Homelander, the monster beneath the smile. "You're fucking dead. All of you. I'm going to laser every single one of you into Skeletor's staff erupted with a beam of purple energy that hit Homelander square in the chest and sent him flying 3 blocks away. "Oh, do shut up," Skeletor said irritably. "Your posturing is tiresome. If you're going to make threats, at least have the competence to back them up." The silence that followed was deafening. Huey finally found his voice. Did you just bitch-slap Homelander?" "I prefer to think of it as educating him on the pecking order," Skeletor replied smugly. Then his expression turned serious, his mystical senses flaring. "But we have a more immediate problem. I can feel multiple powerful presences converging on this location. Your heroes are calling for reinforcements." He-Man nodded, his tactical instincts from countless battles kicking in. "Skeletor's right. We need to move, understand this world, and figure out how to get back to Eternia." He looked at Butcher directly. "You said these champions have committed terrible acts. Explain, quickly." Butcher's smile was all teeth and trauma. "How much time you got? Because that list is longer than my cock." "Butcher," MM warned. Right. Cliff Notes version. Vought International creates superheroes using a drug called Compound V. They market them as heroes, but they're really just products. Most of them are narcissistic, violent psychopaths who know Vought will cover up whatever atrocities they commit. Homelander there? He's lasered civilians, murdered anyone who threatens his image, and probably has a body count in the hundreds. And he's America's favorite hero. He-Man's face went through several emotions: disbelief, horror, and finally settling on grim determination. That's not heroism. That's tyranny with better publicity. "Now the barbarian gets it," Skeletor crowed. He turned to Butcher with something approaching respect. "Very well. Temporary alliance. We need information about this world. You need protection from the inevitable retaliation. But make no mistake, human. I am not your ally. I am a circumstantial asset. The moment our goals diverge, I will pursue my own interests." "Least you're honest about being a cunt," Butcher said, almost admiringly. "That's more than I can say for most soups. Come on, we've got a safe house in Brooklyn. We can talk there before—" The ground shook. He-Man's warrior instincts flared. Above, a formation of Vought security forces descended from the sky. Black Noir had recovered and brought back up. But more concerning were the 2 figures leading them. Queen Maeve, looking resigned but ready, and someone new. A woman in a form-fitting costume with perfect hair and an Instagram-ready smile. "Hi there," Starlight said with weaponized cheerfulness, her hands beginning to glow. "I'm Starlight, newest member of the 7, and I'm going to have to ask you gentlemen to come with us peacefully." Skeletor looked at He-Man. He-Man looked at Skeletor. "Is everyone in this world pathologically friendly before trying to kill you?" Skeletor asked. "It's deeply unsettling," He-Man agreed. Then all hell broke loose. Starlight's light blasts hit He-Man's raised sword and scattered harmlessly. Black Noir came at Skeletor with knives that would have killed a normal man. But the sorcerer simply teleported behind him and blasted him through a building with casual disdain. "Go!" Butcher shouted to his team. "Fall back! We can't get caught in this!" The boys scattered as the real fight began. Queen Maeve engaged He-Man directly. She was skilled, genuinely skilled, and for the first time He-Man found himself facing someone who actually knew how to fight rather than just rely on powers. Her punches were precise, her movements economical. She was holding back, he could tell, but there was real warrior spirit there buried under years of corporate bullshit. "You're better than this," He-Man said as he parried her strikes without his sword, unwilling to use a blade against someone who might still have honor. "I can see it. Whatever made you into this, you didn't start here." Something flickered in Maeve's eyes, surprise, maybe pain, but she kept fighting. Skeletor, meanwhile, was having the time of his life. He hadn't had a proper brawl in weeks, and these Vought security forces were actual challenges, unlike Homelander's tantrum. He teleported through their ranks, staff crackling with energy, not killing, but definitely not being gentle. Finally, he cackled, some proper minions. Not the best I've faced, but adequate. Then Homelander returned. He came in fast, silent, his eyes already burning red. But this time he wasn't aiming for He-Man or Skeletor. He was aiming for the watching crowd of civilians, their phones still out, still recording. "You embarrassed me," Homelander said, and his voice was dead calm, which was somehow worse. "So now I'm going to show these people what happens when you embarrass America's greatest hero." The laser eyes fired. He-Man moved faster than thought itself, his sword intercepting the beam before it could incinerate a mother holding her child. The force of the deflection sent both Homelander and He-Man crashing through buildings. In the chaos, Skeletor saw his opportunity. He grabbed Starlight by the throat, not killing, just immobilizing, and teleported them both to a rooftop 3 blocks away. "Listen very carefully, cheerful girl," he hissed, his yellow eyes boring into hers. "Your companion just tried to murder innocents because his pride was wounded. Is that the hero you signed up to support?" Starlight's hands blazed with light, but she hesitated. Because her body was saying attack, but her mind was screaming that he was right. I don't understand," she whispered. "Homelander wouldn't... He's supposed to be a hero." Skeletor's laugh was bitter and knowing. "Child, I've been called a villain for 40 years. I've tried to conquer kingdoms, overthrow rightful rulers, and seize ultimate power. And even I don't target children to settle personal scores. What does that tell you about your hero?" He released her and stepped back, staff ready but not attacking. "Think about that," he said, and teleported away. Starlight stood alone on that rooftop, her hands still glowing, her perfect smile finally cracking. Below, He-Man and Homelander's battle was tearing Fifth Avenue apart, and for the first time in his life, Homelander was losing. The safe house in Brooklyn smelled like stale beer, gun oil, and Frenchie's terrible coffee. It was 3 a.m. and nobody was sleeping. He-Man sat on a reinforced chair. The normal one had shattered under his weight, still wearing his battle harness, looking profoundly out of place among the scattered weapons, surveillance equipment, and Mother's Milk's obsessively organized manila folders. His sword rested across his lap, and even in the dim light it seemed to pulse with its own inner radiance. Skeletor stood by the window, staff in hand, his skeletal features making him look like death itself, taking a coffee break. He'd refused to sit, preferring to monitor the streets below with both mystical senses and paranoid vigilance. "So let me get this straight," He-Man said slowly, rubbing his temples like he had a headache. "These heroes are created by injecting children with an experimental drug. They're then raised by this corporation, Vought, to be marketed like action figures. And the public genuinely believes they're noble champions? Welcome to America, mate," Butcher said, taking a long pull from his beer. "Land of the free, home of the fucking deluded." Huey had spent the last hour pulling up files on his laptop, showing He-Man and Skeletor incident after incident. Covered up murders, falsified rescue reports, the Deep's sexual assaults, A-Train running through Robin, through Huey's girlfriend, and Vought paying off everyone involved. "This is worse than Snake Mountain on its darkest day," He-Man whispered, and there was genuine horror in his voice. "Skeletor has tried to conquer Eternia countless times, but he's never pretended to be its savior while doing it." "I have standards," Skeletor said dryly from the window. "Villainy loses all meaning if everyone's doing it. These soups have industrialized evil and wrapped it in patriotic branding. It's almost impressive in its scope of depravity. Mother's Milk looked up from his laptop. I've been running your biological signatures through every database we've got access to. You're not in any of them. No compound V markers, no genetic modifications, nothing. It's like you don't exist in our world. Because we don't, Skeletor said simply. Or didn't, until my dimensional transporter malfunctioned during He-Man's typical interference. He shot an accusatory glare at his nemesis. We're from another universe entirely, another reality. Eternia, a world where magic is real, where power is earned or gifted by cosmic forces, and where heroes and villains at least have the decency to be honest about which side they're on. Frenchie's eyes lit up. Interdimensional travel. But this is theoretically impossible. The energy requirements alone would require magic, Skeletor finished, which your world has forgotten how to access if it ever could. Your science has impressive moments, but it's ultimately just manipulating the material world. Magic manipulates reality itself. He tapped his staff against the floor, and purple energy briefly illuminated the room. This is not electrical energy or chemical reaction. This is fundamental force translated through will. Kimiko signed something, and Frenchie translated, "She asks if you can send yourself home." Skeletor's skull face somehow managed to look frustrated. The transporter is on Eternia. I'd need to build another one, which requires materials that likely don't exist in this magically dead world, or find enough mystical energy to punch through dimensional barriers, neither of which seems immediately possible. "So you're stuck here," Butcher said, and there was calculation in his voice. "Stuck here with powers that make you stronger than any super we've ever encountered. Interesting position to be in." He-Man's eyes narrowed. "I can hear you plotting from here, Butcher. Whatever you're thinking, I won't be your weapon. My purpose is to protect the innocent, not wage your war. Even if my war is against the exact kind of tyrant you spent your whole life fighting?" Butcher leaned forward, intensity radiating from him. "You saw Homelander. You felt what he was willing to do. That wasn't a one-time thing. That's who he is. He's raped women, murdered anyone who crosses him, and Vought covers it all up because he's their golden boy. He's everything you claim to stand against, but with a flag and a smile." He-Man was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy. "On Eternia, when someone abuses their power, I stop them. I don't kill. I believe even the darkest soul can find redemption. But I stop them. Here." He gestured helplessly at the files covering the table. "How do I fight an entire system? How do I stop an army of false heroes when revealing the truth might destroy the hope people have in heroism itself? Welcome to the fucking moral quandary that's been eating at us for years," MM said quietly. "We expose these soups. The public doesn't believe us. Vaught's propaganda machine is too strong. We kill them. We're the monsters. We do nothing. More innocent people die." Skeletor laughed, that bone-rattling cackle that had echoed through Snake Mountain for decades. "Oh, He-Man, for once you're facing a problem you can't solve with muscles and moral superiority. Delightful." But then his tone turned serious. "However, even I find this situation distasteful. Evil should be a choice, a deliberate path taken with full knowledge of the consequences. These soups are products, manufactured, marketed, and allowed to commit atrocities because they're profitable. That's not villainy, that's just business. And somehow, that's worse." A phone buzzed. Butcher checked it and swore. "Vaught's mobilizing. They're putting out a story that you two are terrorist soups, foreign agents who attacked the Seven unprovoked. They've got footage edited to make Homelander look like the victim." "Of course they do," He-Man said bitterly. He stood up, his massive frame making the cramped safe house feel even smaller. This is what happens when power is divorced from responsibility, when might serves profit instead of justice. He looked at his sword, the ancient weapon that had never failed him, and for the first time since receiving it, seemed unsure. The elders gave me this power to protect Eternia, but we're not on Eternia anymore. So what? Huey spoke up, his voice shaking but determined. You just give up? Let Homelander keep killing people because you're not in your home universe anymore? He-Man turned to look at the young man, and Huey actually stepped back from the intensity in those eyes. I have never given up on protecting innocence, ever. But I also don't know the rules of this world. I don't know what breaking Vault would cost, what institutions would crumble, what chaos might follow. Typical hero talk, Skeletor muttered. Always worried about breaking things, always concerned about consequences. He turned from the window, his yellow eyes burning. Let me simplify this for you, He-Man, because apparently decades of fighting me have taught you nothing about how power actually works. This world has a corrupt system that's too entrenched to reform. It needs to be broken, shattered, burned to the ground so something better can grow from the ashes. And you'd be happy to light that fire, He-Man said, his hand moving to his sword. Of course I would. I'm a villain. It's literally what I do. Skeletor's staff crackled with energy. But here's what your noble brain can't seem to process. Sometimes the villain's solution is the only one that works. You can't negotiate with Vought. You can't reform them. They're a cancer, and cancers must be cut out. Or, Mother's Milk interrupted before the two Eternians could start fighting in the cramped safe house. You could work with us. We've been planning to take down Vought for years. We've got intelligence, contacts, resources. What we don't have is muscle that can actually stand up to Homelander. Butcher stood up, walking over to stand directly in front of He-Man. He was shorter, older, more tired. Just a human facing down someone who could bench press a tank. But he didn't flinch. I don't give a shit about your moral crisis, mate, Butcher said quietly. I don't care about your code or your redemption speeches or your fear of breaking things. What I care about is stopping monsters from hurting more people, and right now you're the only thing I've ever seen that made Homelander bleed. He paused. My wife. Homelander raped my wife. She had his kid. It drove her to suicide, and Vought covered it all up, made it disappear like she never mattered. The silence in the room was absolute. He-Man's expression softened, and when he spoke, his voice was gentle. I'm sorry, no one should have to endure that. I don't want your sorry, Butcher said. I want your sword. Before He-Man could respond, Skeletor's staff slammed into the ground, and mystical energy washed over the room. Everyone tensed, but the sorcerer wasn't attacking. He was scanning. We're about to have company, Skeletor announced. Multiple enhanced signatures approaching. Your Vought has apparently decided that subtlety is optional. He turned to Butcher with something like respect. You have a back exit to this hovel, I presume. 3 of them, MM confirmed. Frenchie, start the van. Kimiko, grab the go bags. Huey. The wall exploded inward. Black Noir came through first, silent and deadly. Behind him, A-Train vibrated in the doorway, his eyes wide and wild. He'd been dosed with more V, probably to make up for the beating Skeletor had given him earlier. And behind them, descending through the hole in the ceiling like an avenging angel, came Homelander. But this wasn't the media-friendly Homelander. His suit was torn, dried blood crusted under his nose, and his eyes burned with a hatred so pure it was almost transcendent. Found you, he said simply. He-Man's sword was in his hand instantly. Skeletor's staff blazed with power. The boys scattered, grabbing weapons they knew would be useless, but refusing to go down without a fight. This safe house is compromised, Skeletor said calmly, even as battle began. He-Man, might I suggest? Castle Grayskull Protocol, He-Man said, understanding immediately. They'd done this 100 times on Eternia, when one of Skeletor's plans went wrong. When both of them were facing something worse than each other, they had an unspoken rule: strategic retreat, regroup, fight another day. Finally, Skeletor shouted, actually pleased, a proper tactical mind. His staff erupted with a massive teleportation spell that engulfed everyone in the room. Boys, Eternians, and a very surprised Homelander who'd been mid-lunge. When the purple energy cleared, they were on a cargo ship in the East River, and Homelander was embedded upside down in a shipping container, his legs kicking comically. That, Skeletor said with satisfaction, never gets old. He-Man looked at Butcher. You have 3 days. Find me evidence of every crime Vought has committed. Every covered-up murder, every falsified report, every innocent life destroyed. If what you've told me is true, I'll help you. But I need to see it. All of it. And you? Butcher asked Skeletor. The sorcerer's skull face managed to convey a predatory smile. Oh, I have my own plans. But don't worry, Butcher. Our goals align for now. Vought needs to fall. How it falls is simply a matter of style. He paused. And I'm growing quite fond of this world's capacity for dramatic irony. False heroes, corporate evil, systemic corruption. It's like someone built a civilization specifically designed for me to dismantle. Behind them, Homelander tore free from the shipping container with a scream of pure rage. We should probably run, Huey said. Agreed, He-Man said. They ran. 3 days later, He-Man stood in an abandoned Vought research facility in Pennsylvania, reading files that made his stomach turn. The facility had been shut down 5 years ago after what Vought's internal memos euphemistically called acceptable loss rates. What that actually meant was that 73% of the children injected with Compound 5 had died screaming, their bodies rejecting the enhancement and essentially cooking them from the inside out. The survivors, kids as young as 4, had been immediately separated from their families, placed in Vought's development program, and trained to become products. He-Man's hands shook as he read the medical reports. Psychological evaluations that showed clear trauma, clear signs of abuse, all documented and then ignored. Children who'd begged to go home. Children who'd been punished for showing weakness. Children who'd been molded into weapons and taught that being a hero meant doing whatever Vought told them. This is slavery, he whispered. They're enslaving children, breaking them and then selling them as heroes. Mother's Milk stood beside him, his jaw clenched. Now you see what we've been trying to tell the world. This isn't a few bad apples. This is the entire fucking tree. The facility was massive. Labs, training rooms, what looked disturbingly like prison cells with child-sized beds. Frenchie had bypassed the security systems easily. Vought had assumed the place was too remote to ever be found. They'd underestimated how long the boys had been tracking their operations. Huey was in another room, cataloging evidence on his laptop. Every document, every video, every piece of proof they could carry. Kimiko moved through the shadows like a ghost, her enhanced senses alert for any security that might have been left behind. And Butcher was in the sub-basement where the worst experiments had taken place. He-Man found him standing in front of a wall of photographs, children's faces, hundreds of them, each with a date, a number, and a single word, terminated. This is what Vought does, Butcher said, his voice flat with barely controlled rage. They don't just make heroes. They grind up kids to find the ones that survive, and then they break whatever's left until it's useful. He pointed to one photo, a little girl with dark hair and a bright smile. That's Mariana Reyes. Age 6. Her parents were told she died in a car accident. Actually, she lasted 3 days after the injection before her organs liquefied. Vought paid the parents $2 million and made them sign an NDA. He-Man felt something break inside him. Not his strength, not his power, but something more fundamental. His faith in the idea that heroism was universal, that honor existed in every world. "Where's Skeletor?" he asked quietly. "That's actually a good question," MM said, checking his phone. "He left the safe house yesterday morning and hasn't checked in since." He-Man's warrior instincts flared with alarm. "That's not like him. Skeletor's many things, but he's not reckless. If he's gone silent, it's because he's planning something big." On the other side of New York, in Vogt Tower's executive suite, Skeletor sat across from Stan Edgar with a glass of very expensive whiskey and an expression of amused contempt. "Mr. Skellington," Edgar said with the practiced calm of a man who'd negotiated with terrorists, dictators, and worse, "I appreciate you taking this meeting." "It's Skeletor," the sorcerer corrected, sipping the whiskey and grudgingly acknowledging its quality. "And I didn't take this meeting. I teleported into your office, bypassed your security, and waited for you to arrive like the overworked corporate drone you are. There's a difference." Edgar's expression didn't change. The man had a poker face that would make a statue jealous. "Nevertheless, I believe we can reach an understanding. You're clearly not from this world. You have no stake in its politics, no loyalty to any faction. Vought could make your stay here very comfortable. We have resources, technology, connections. Whatever you need to return to your home dimension, we can provide. In exchange for what?" Skeletor leaned back, his skeletal features making it impossible to read his expression, but his tone suggested he was enjoying this immensely. "Let me guess. You want me to kill He-Man? Or perhaps deliver him to you for study. Maybe you want to extract our powers, synthesize them, create a new generation of Compound Phi that includes genuine magical abilities." Edgar smiled thinly. "You're perceptive." "I'm a genius," Skeletor corrected. "I've conquered kingdoms, mastered forbidden magics, and ruled armies that would make your soupes wet themselves. I've heard 1,000 offers from 1,000 desperate fools trying to buy my loyalty." He set down his glass with a sharp click. "They all end the same way, with me taking what I want and leaving them in ruins. So you're refusing?" "Oh no," Skeletor's laugh was like breaking bones. "I'm negotiating. You see, Edgar, I've spent 3 days studying your world. Your internet is remarkably comprehensive. I know about Vogt's crimes. I know about the Compound V experiments, the cover-ups, Homelanders, issues. And I know that you, specifically, are the architect of this entire empire of lies." Edgar's expression finally cracked. Just a fraction, just a hint of concern. "Here's what's going to happen," Skeletor continued, his yellow eyes burning with malevolent intelligence. "You're going to give me complete access to Vogt's experimental labs, every piece of research you have on dimensional physics, exotic energy sources, and chemical enhancement. You're going to do this because if you don't, I'm going to walk out of here and tell He-Man exactly where Vogt keeps its detailed records on every murdered child, every covered-up rape, every falsified rescue." "We deny everything," Edgar said calmly. "Vogt's lawyers are the best in the world." "You deny it to whom?" "He-Man." Skeletor's laugh was genuinely amused. "Edgar, let me explain something about the man you just tried to paint as a terrorist. He's not bound by your laws. He's not intimidated by your lawyers. He's not even remotely impressed by your wealth or power. He's a warrior prince from a dimension where power is meant to serve justice, not profit. And right now, he's in an abandoned Vout facility reading about how you murdered children for market research." For the first time, Edgar looked genuinely concerned. "You're bluffing. He can't hurt Vout. We have..." You have Homelander, Skeletor interrupted, who He-Man defeated in about 30 seconds. You have the Seven, who collectively lasted about 4 minutes. You have security forces, lawyers, politicians in your pocket. None of it matters. Because He-Man isn't trying to destroy you legally or financially. When he decides you're evil, and trust me, those files will convince him, he's simply going to tear down every vault facility he can find until someone stops him. And the only people who might be able to stop him are me and Homelander. He leaned forward. And I assure you, Homelander can't. Edgar was silent for a long moment, his legendary composure cracking. What do you really want? I told you. Complete access to your research. I need to understand this world's science if I'm going to build a way home. And in exchange, Skeletor smiled, and it was a terrible thing to see on a skull face. In exchange, I'll keep He-Man occupied. I'll slow him down. Give you time to prepare defenses, move assets, whatever corporate evil you need to do. I'm not saying I'll stop him. I'm not sure I could even if I wanted to, but I'll buy you time. Why? Edgar asked. Why help us at all? Skeletor stood, his staff crackling with power. Because chaos serves my interests. He-Man wants to save this world, rebuild it into something noble. Boring. I'd much rather watch it tear itself apart while I conduct my research. Your world's corruption is fascinating. I want to see how deep it goes before the whole structure collapses. He moved toward the window. Besides, I've been fighting He-Man for decades. It would be almost disappointing if our rivalry ended because he found a cause that actually matched his moral absolutism. He teleported away in a flash of purple light, leaving Edgar alone with his thoughts and a growing sense that he just made a deal with something far more dangerous than any Super Vote had ever created. Back in Pennsylvania, He-Man's communicator, a small crystal device from Eternia that Skeletor had given him years ago for emergency contact purposes, suddenly pulsed with energy. Skeletor's voice echoed in his mind, dry and mocking. He-Man, before you commit to your inevitable heroic rampage, you should know that Vote is preparing a counterstrike. They're calling in every Supi they have, including some you haven't met yet. They know about your human allies. They know about the evidence you've gathered, and they're planning to eliminate all of you before sunrise. He-Man grabbed the communicator. How do you know this? Because I just finished negotiating with their CEO. Lovely man. Completely psychotic, but excellent whiskey. Before He-Man could respond, Skeletor continued, I bought you 3 hours. Use them wisely. And He-Man, that facility you're in, destroy it. Burn it to the ground. Some places are too evil to exist. The communication cut off. Butcher looked at He-Man's expression. What did Skeletor do? Something very Skeletor, He-Man said, his jaw set. He's playing both sides, gathering information, and probably plotting something that will make this entire situation worse. He looked at the wall of dead children's photographs. But he's also right. This place needs to be destroyed. And Vought? Huey asked. What about them? He-Man's hand moved to his sword, and for the first time since arriving in this world, there was no hesitation in his voice. Vought International has declared war on justice itself. They've enslaved children, murdered innocents, and corrupted the very concept of heroism. The power sword blazed with ancient magic. By the power of Grayskull, I will answer that declaration. Mother's Milk pulled out his phone. Then we need to move fast. If Vaught's mobilizing, we've got maybe 2 hours before they hit us with everything they've got. 2 hours is enough, He-Man said. He raised his sword, and energy poured from it, not destructive but cleansing. The facility began to glow with golden light. Every document, every file, every trace of the evil committed here burning away in purifying fire that somehow didn't spread, didn't consume oxygen, just erased. When it was done, the facility was gone. Not destroyed, unmade, like it had never existed. How? Frenchie whispered. The power sword was forged by the elders of Eternia, He-Man explained quietly. It can create, destroy, or transform. I usually use it to protect, but it can also purge. He looked at the boys. Gather your evidence, every file, every video, every piece of proof. We're going to expose Vought for what they are. And then? Butcher asked. And then, He-Man said, his voice carrying the weight of destiny, we're going to tear down their tower. Brick by brick, if necessary. Across the city in Vought Tower, alarms began to sound. Every soup on Vought's payroll received the same message: contain or kill the threats. No limits, no restrictions, whatever it takes. Homelander stood on the roof, his cape snapping in the wind, his eyes burning red with anticipation. Finally, he said to no one in particular, no more pretending, no more holding back. The war for the boys' universe had officially begun, and somewhere between the two sides, Skeletor sat in a stolen Vought lab, surrounded by stolen research, building something that neither heroes nor villains would expect. The sun rose over Manhattan like a bloody eye, and Homelander stood at the edge of Vought Tower's observation deck, watching the city wake up. Behind him, the Seven assembled, or what was left of them. Queen Maeve looked exhausted, her usual defiance ground down by years of compromise. A train vibrated with nervous energy and too much Compound V. The Deep kept glancing at the door like he wanted to run. Black Noir was silent as always, but even he seemed tense. Starlight was notably absent. "Where's our little ray of sunshine?" Homelander asked, his voice deceptively cheerful. "She called in sick," Maeve said flatly. Homelander's eye twitched. "Sick? Right. Because that happens to soups." He turned to face them, and the smile on his face was a razor wrapped in plastic. "Let me be very clear about something. We have a barbarian and a skeleton running around my city, embarrassing us, making us look weak. And weak doesn't sell action figures. Weak doesn't move merchandise. Weak gets you replaced." "They're not like other soups," Maeve said carefully. "They're something else, something we haven't encountered before." "I don't care." Homelander's voice cracked like thunder, making even Black Noir flinch. "I am the greatest hero who ever lived. I am America, and I will not be shown up by some cosplaying bodybuilder and his pet skeleton." He took a breath, forcing his smile back into place. "Now, Stan Edgar has given us carte blanche, no restrictions, no PR concerns. We find them, and we end them. Understood?" The Seven nodded, but there was no enthusiasm in it. They'd all felt He-Man's power, seen what Skeletor could do. This wasn't going to be like their usual fights against untrained supes or helpless humans. This was going to be a war. In a subway tunnel beneath Queens, the boys had set up a new temporary base. Huey was still cataloging evidence while Frenchie worked on some kind of jury-rigged EMP device that probably wouldn't work but made him feel useful. Mother's Milk organized their remaining weapons with military precision. Kimiko sat with He-Man, teaching him sign language with surprising patience. He was learning quickly. Enhanced intellect apparently came with the whole Power of Grayskull package. "Your world," He-Man signed slowly, "has forgotten what heroes are." Kimiko nodded, then signed back. "Or maybe we never knew." Butcher watched from across the tunnel, his expression unreadable. He still didn't entirely trust He-Man. The man was too good, too noble, too much like the soups pretended to be. But he'd seen the warrior's face in that facility, seen the genuine horror and rage at what Vought had done. Maybe, just maybe, He-Man was the real thing. "We've got movement," MM called out, checking his surveillance feeds. Vaught's mobilizing assets all across the city, not just the 7. They're calling in every soupy on their payroll. We're looking at maybe 30 enhanced individuals converging on last known locations of you and Skeletor. "Skeletor's still dark?" He-Man asked, concern evident in his voice. "Radio silent for 12 hours, Butcher confirmed. Either he's dead, captured, or planning something monumentally stupid." "It's definitely the third option," He-Man said with the certainty of someone who'd dealt with Skeletor's schemes for decades. "He's always planning something. The question is whether it will help us or make everything exponentially worse." "I'm betting on worse," Huey muttered. He-Man stood, his massive frame making the tunnel feel cramped. "We can't stay on the defensive. Vought has resources, numbers, and home advantage. If we keep hiding, they'll eventually find us and wear us down." He looked at Butcher. "You wanted my help taking down Vought. Tell me, where would it hurt them most if we struck?" Butcher's grin was feral. "The Sage Grove Center. It's where they conduct their most sensitive compound Vi research. It's where they refine the formula, test new variants, and keep records of every experiment they've ever done." He pulled up a map on his tablet. "It's also where they keep the failures." "Failures?" He-Man's expression darkened. "Soups who didn't turn out right, too unstable for public consumption, too valuable to kill. They keep them locked up, sedated, studied." Mother's Milk's voice was tight with controlled anger. "Last count was 47 people in there. Some have been locked up for over a decade." He-Man's jaw set. "Then that's where we go. We free them and destroy the research." "It's a fortress," Frenchie warned. "Security, armed guards, multiple soups on site. We'd need an army to breach it." "You have me," He-Man said simply. "That will be sufficient." Before anyone could respond, the tunnel shook. Not an earthquake, something else. Something powerful moving fast through the subway system. A train burst through the wall at supersonic speed, grabbing Huey before anyone could react and disappearing back the way he'd come. "Huey!" Butcher roared. The Deep came next, water flooding the tunnel from a breach in the nearby pipes, his enhanced strength throwing Mother's Milk against the wall. Black Noir dropped from a ventilation shaft, knives already flying. And then the ceiling exploded, and Homelander descended like a vengeful god. "Found you," he said, and his eyes began to glow. He-Man's sword was up instantly, deflecting the laser vision, but the force of it drove him backward. Homelander pressed the attack, finally unleashing the full extent of his power without cameras watching, without PR concerns, without pretense. This was Homelander unbound, and it was terrifying. "You think you're better than me?" Homelander screamed as he rained punches down on He-Man's defense. "You think your little sword and your muscles make you special? I'm a god. I can do whatever I want, kill whoever I want, and nobody can stop me." "That," He-Man grunted, blocking another strike, "is precisely why you're not a hero." He swept Homelander's legs, actual technique, actual skill, and followed up with a punch that sent the Soupe crashing through 3 subway cars. But Homelander wasn't alone. The Deep had Butcher in a headlock, slowly crushing his throat. Black Noir was a whirlwind of blades, keeping Kimiko and Frenchie pinned down. And somewhere above, A-Train had Huey. He-Man made a choice. He raised his sword to the ceiling and called upon its power. Golden energy erupted upward, not attacking, but creating, forming a massive golden dome that separated the battlefield, giving the boys precious seconds to escape. "Go!" he shouted. "I'll hold them. Find Huey. Get to safety." "We're not leaving you," Butcher choked out, even as the Deep's grip tightened. "You're not leaving me," He-Man said, and there was absolute confidence in his voice. "You're completing the mission. Trust me." Mother's Milk grabbed Butcher, Kimiko grabbed Frenchie, and they ran, leaving He-Man alone with the Seven. The Golden Dome faded. Homelander pulled himself from the wreckage, blood trickling from his mouth, the first real injury he'd sustained since childhood. "You just made a huge mistake, Barbarian." "No," He-Man said, settling into a combat stance he'd learned from the greatest warriors of Eternia. "You made the mistake of thinking power makes you invincible. Let me teach you the difference between strength and skill." What followed was the most brutal fight Homelander had ever experienced. He-Man didn't just overpower him, he outfought him. Every punch was precisely placed, every block was perfect, every counterattack was devastating. This wasn't a brawl. This was a master warrior dismantling an amateur who'd never had to truly fight for anything. Queen Maeve watched in something like awe. She'd been a real hero once before Vought broke her, and seeing someone actually fight with honor, with skill, with purpose, it awakened something she'd thought was dead. When Homelander went for another laser vision attack, Maeve stepped between them. "Maeve?" Homelander's voice was confused, betrayed. "What are you doing?" "Something I should have done years ago," she said quietly. Then she punched Homelander so hard his jaw cracked. The tunnel erupted into chaos as the Seven fractured, years of resentment and fear finally boiling over. And above the city, in Vought's private laboratories, Skeletor completed the final connection on his dimensional scanner and smiled his terrible smile. "Oh, He-Man," he said to the empty room. "You're going to be so angry with me. I can't wait." A-Train didn't know what to do with the terrified young man he'd grabbed. He'd been ordered to capture one of the boys, leverage, Homelander had said. But now that he had Huey pinned on a Vought tower rooftop, the speedster's usual confidence was nowhere to be found. "Please," Huey begged, his voice shaking. "Please, you don't have to do this. You're not like Homelander, you're not—" "Shut up," A-Train snapped, but there was no real menace in it. His hands were shaking. Too much compound V in his system, too much pressure, too much everything. "You don't know anything about me." "I know you killed Robin," Huey said quietly, and something in his voice made A-Train actually look at him. "I know you ran through her and didn't even stop, didn't even look back. She was my girlfriend. She was everything to me. And you killed her because you were high and racing shockwave, and you couldn't be bothered to care." A-Train's face twisted with something that might have been guilt or might have been anger. It was an accident. I didn't mean to," Huey laughed bitterly. "Yeah, that's what Vought told me when they offered me money to keep quiet. An accident, like that makes it okay. Like that brings her back." He struggled against A-Train's grip. "You want to know the difference between you and He-Man?" He would have stopped. He would have cared. "You're just a guy with powers who thinks that makes him special." The words hit harder than any punch. A-Train had spent his entire life running, from poverty, from irrelevance, from the constant fear that he'd be replaced by someone younger, faster, more marketable. He'd sold his soul to Vought, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but the speed and the terror of losing it. "I didn't have a choice," A-Train whispered. "Everyone has a choice," Huey said. "Even now, even you." Before A-Train could respond, the rooftop exploded with purple energy. Skeletor materialized in a flash of arcane power, his staff crackling with electricity. "Well, well," the sorcerer said, his yellow eyes gleaming. "A hostage situation. How tediously predictable." He looked at A-Train with something like pity. "You're the fast one, aren't you? The one who's slowly killing himself with chemical enhancement because he's afraid of being forgotten." A-Train's eyes widened. "How did you—" "I'm a master of dark magic, you simpleton. I can sense the poison coursing through your system. Another year, maybe two, and your heart will explode like an overripe fruit." Skeletor tilted his skull face. "Is it worth it? The speed? The fame? Knowing that you're nothing without the drug and dying because of it? Why do you care?" A-Train spat. "I don't," Skeletor said honestly, "but I'm conducting an experiment and you're interfering with it. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to release the boy, leave this rooftop, and forget you ever saw us. In exchange, I won't teleport you 300 feet straight up and let gravity demonstrate its inexorable laws." O-Train's grip on Huey loosened, not because of the threat, though that was certainly motivating, but because something in Skeletor's brutal honesty was more compelling than Homelander's insane demands. "They'll kill me if I let him go," A-Train said quietly. "They'll kill you anyway," Skeletor replied. "The only question is whether you die as Vogt's puppet or as your own man. Choose quickly. My patience has limits." A train looked at Huey, then at Skeletor, then at the city spread out below them. He thought about Robin, about the dozens of other people he'd hurt, about the man he'd become in pursuit of fame and relevance. He let Huey go. "Go," A-Train said, not looking at either of them. "Just go." Skeletor grabbed Huey and teleported away in a flash of purple light, leaving A-Train alone on the rooftop with his choices and his regrets. They materialized in a Volt research laboratory, one of the secret ones that didn't officially exist. Huey stumbled, disoriented, while Skeletor immediately moved to the nearest computer terminal. "Where are we?" Huey asked, steadying himself. "Vaught's Dimensional Research Division," Skeletor said, his skeletal fingers flying across the keyboard with surprising dexterity. "They've been studying exotic energy sources for years, trying to create soups with more interesting powers than punch hard and fly mediocrely. Most of it is garbage, but there are some genuinely fascinating concepts buried in their data." "You made a deal with Vought," Huey said, understanding dawning. "You're helping them." "I'm helping myself," Skeletor corrected. "Vought is simply a means to an end. They have resources I need to return to Eternia. And in exchange, I'm providing, let's call it strategic consultation." He pulled up a schematic that looked like something out of a science fiction nightmare. "Besides, my assistance to them is temporary. Once I have what I need, I'll destroy them just as thoroughly as He-Man intends to. I'm just more efficient about it." "You're using everyone," Huey said. "Of course I am. I'm a villain. It's literally in my job description." Skeletor paused, then actually turned to look at Huey. "But unlike Vought, I'm honest about it. I don't pretend to be heroic. I don't wrap my evil in patriotic speeches and marketing campaigns. When I conquer a kingdom, everyone knows exactly who's responsible." "That doesn't make it better," Huey protested. "It makes it honest." Skeletor returned to his work. "Your world has forgotten the value of honest villainy. You've industrialized evil, sanitized it, made it corporate. It's revolting. Evil should be a choice made with full knowledge and acceptance of consequences, not something you stumble into because a focus group said it would increase quarterly earnings." Despite himself, Huey found he couldn't entirely disagree. There was something almost refreshing about Skeletor's brutal honesty compared to Vaught's endless layers of lies. "Why did you save me?" Huey asked. "I didn't save you. I acquired a useful asset." Skeletor pulled a drive from the computer and tucked it into his armor. "You're going to deliver a message to He-Man for me. Tell him that Vought is planning to use Compound V on civilians. Mass distribution. They're going to create an army of soupies to overwhelm him through sheer numbers." "That's insane," Huey breathed. "The mortality rate is acceptable to Vought if it means eliminating a threat," Skeletor finished. "They've already begun production. Within 48 hours, They'll start human trials in low-income neighborhoods where disappearances won't be noticed. He grabbed Huey's shoulder and his grip was like iron. Also tell him that I've found a way home. The portal will be ready in 72 hours. He can come with me if he wants, return to Eternia, leave this cesspool to its fate. He won't, Huey said with certainty. He-Man won't abandon people who need help. Skeletor's laugh was like wind through a graveyard. I know. That's what makes him such a predictable fool and such a genuinely irritating nemesis. The sorcerer's voice softened just slightly. But give him the message anyway. He deserves to know he has a choice, even if we both know what he'll choose. Before Huey could respond, Skeletor teleported him back to the boys' rendezvous point, an abandoned warehouse in Brooklyn where Butcher, MM, Frenchie, and Kimiko were frantically planning a rescue. Huey! Butcher's relief was palpable. How did you? Skeletor, Huey said simply. He's working with Vought, sort of, and he has a message for He-Man. Where is He-Man? Huey looked around the warehouse. Did he? He's still fighting the Seven in the subway, MM reported, checking his surveillance feeds. But something's happened. Maeve turned on Homelander. It's turned into a full-scale brawl down there. On the screens, they could see the chaos. He-Man fighting with controlled precision against Homelander's rage-fueled attacks. Queen Maeve had apparently decided decades of abuse was enough and was fighting with a fury that suggested years of repressed violence. The Deep was trying to flee, but kept getting pulled back into the fight. Black Noir was the only one still following orders, but even he seemed hesitant. And then the feed cut out as something, or someone, destroyed the surveillance cameras. We need to get down there, Butcher said, grabbing weapons. With what? Frenchie asked practically. We have bullets that don't hurt them and good intentions that matter even less. We have information, Huey said, relaying Skeletor's message. Vaught's going to create an army of soups. They're going to test Compound 5 on civilians. If we don't stop them, the warehouse doors exploded inward. Starlight stood in the entrance, her hands glowing with power. Her perfect superhero costume somehow looking wrong now, like a uniform she no longer wanted to wear. I know, she said quietly. I heard everything. Vaught's planning to go live with mass Compound V distribution in 2 days. They're calling it Project Guardian. Telling the public it's about empowering everyone to be heroes. Her voice cracked. But I saw the projected mortality rates. They're expecting 60 to 70% of test subjects to die. And you're here to stop us from interfering? Butcher's hand moved to his gun, even though they all knew it would be useless. I'm here, Starlight said, and her hands stopped glowing. Because I don't want to be part of this anymore. Because He-Man was right. Because I became a soup to save people, and somewhere along the way I became part of the problem. She looked at each of them. I want to help, if you'll let me. The silence stretched for a long moment. Then Kimiko stepped forward and signed, Welcome to the Resistance. Starlight smiled, genuinely smiled, without the plastic perfection of her media training, and for the first time since putting on the costume, felt like she might actually be a hero. Then we need to move fast, Mother's Milk said, already planning. If Vaught's going live in 2 days, we need to hit their production facilities, expose the truth, and get He-Man to safety before... The ground shook. Not an earthquake, something else. Something that made every surveillance screen in the warehouse flicker and die, replaced by a single image. Skeletor's skull face, grinning that terrible grin. Citizens of Earth. Skeletor's voice boomed through every screen, every phone, every device in the city. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Skeletor, Master of Evil, and I have a confession to make about your heroes. Every screen in New York, from Times Square's massive displays to the smallest smartphone, showed the same image. Skeletor sitting in what was clearly a Vault executive office, his feet up on an expensive desk, Havoc's staff resting casually across his lap. "I've spent the last 72 hours in your world," Skeletor continued, his voice carrying a theatrical quality that suggested he was enjoying himself immensely. "And I must say, I'm impressed. In Eternia, I've tried for decades to conquer a single kingdom through honest villainy, magic, armies, the occasional giant monster. But you've managed to enslave an entire civilization through capitalism and strategic marketing. Masterful, really." In the Vault Tower boardroom, Stan Edgar watched the broadcast with the expression of a man watching his empire crumble in real time. "Turn it off," he said quietly. "We can't," a technician replied, panic in his voice. "He's overridden every system, every satellite, every network. This is broadcasting globally. As some of you know," Skeletor continued, "your heroes are manufactured. Compound V, a chemical enhancement created by Vault International, is injected into children, usually without consent. Mortality rate is approximately 73%. The survivors are then psychologically conditioned to serve corporate interests while pretending to serve humanity." He pulled up files, documents, video footage, everything the boys had gathered, plus more. Much more. But here's where it gets interesting. Video played of Homelander lasering a protester who'd gotten too close, of the Deep's assaults, of A-Train's countless hit and runs, of staged rescues and falsified reports. Every dirty secret Vought had buried, now displayed for the world to see. "You might wonder why I'm exposing this," Skeletor said, his yellow eyes gleaming. "After all, I'm a villain. Shouldn't I appreciate their industrialized evil? Well, here's the thing. I'm an honest villain. When I try to conquer Eternia, everyone knows it's me. No false advertising, no pretending to be heroic while committing atrocities. These soups have taken everything sacred about the eternal struggle between good and evil and turned it into a profit margin. And that," his staff crackled with energy, "that offends me on a fundamental level." In the subway tunnel, He-Man paused mid-fight, staring at the broadcast playing on someone's abandoned phone. "Skeletor," he breathed. "What have you done?" "He's burning it all down," Queen Maeve said, and there was something like relief in her voice. "Finally, someone's actually burning it all down." Homelander stood frozen, his perfect face twisted in confusion and rage. His entire identity was built on being loved, being worshipped, being America's greatest hero. And now, watching himself on screen, watching the real him, not the PR version, he could feel it crumbling. "This isn't... They're lying." His voice was small, childlike. "I'm a hero, I'm... "You're a product," He-Man said, and there was actually pity in his voice. "You were never given a choice. Vought made you into this, shaped you into their weapon, and then acted surprised when you became a monster." "Don't pity me," Homelander's eyes blazed red. "I don't need your pity. I don't need anything. I'm alone," Queen Maeve finished. "You're alone, Homelander. You've always been alone, because nobody could ever love the real you, and you couldn't stand for anyone to see it." The broadcast continued. Skeletor's voice took on a more serious tone. "But Vought isn't finished. Project Guardian begins in 48 hours. Mass distribution of Compound V to civilians. They'll tell you it's about empowering everyone. What they won't mention is that 2 out of every 3 people who take it will die in agony. They'll call these deaths acceptable losses and move forward anyway, because creating an army of controllable soups is worth more to them than human life." In the warehouse, the boys and Starlight watched in stunned silence. "He's actually doing it," Huey whispered. "He's exposing everything." "But why? Butcher's suspicion was automatic. What's Skeletor get out of this? On screen, as if answering the question, Skeletor smiled his terrible smile. Some of you are wondering about my motives. Simple. In 72 hours, I'll have completed a dimensional portal that will allow me to return to my home universe. I don't particularly care what happens to your world after I'm gone, but I do care about honest villainy, and Vaught's corporate evil is an insult to villains everywhere. He stood, staff in hand. So I'm giving you all a choice. You can continue believing the lies, continue trusting in false heroes, continue letting Vought profit from your suffering. Or, he pointed his staff at the camera, you can rage, you can burn. You can tear down every Vought facility you can find and reclaim the very concept of heroism from those who've corrupted it. The broadcast cut to coordinates, locations of every Vought research facility, every black site, every covered-up atrocity, a roadmap for revolution. One more thing, Skeletor said, his voice dropping to something almost sincere. There is one genuine hero in your world, He-Man, the fool who spent the last 3 days trying to save you despite having no stake in your conflicts and every reason to simply leave. He's real. His power is real. His moral code, however irritatingly rigid, is real. And unlike your manufactured soups, he actually means it when he says he'll protect the innocent. A pause. Don't waste him. The broadcast ended. For 5 seconds, there was silence across the city. Then the riots began. Not organized, not planned, just rage. Years of exploitation, of watching soups commit crimes and walk away, of swallowing Vought's propaganda while knowing something was fundamentally wrong. It all erupted at once. Vought facilities across the city came under siege, not from the boys, not from some organized resistance, but from ordinary people who'd finally seen the truth and decided they'd had enough. In the subway tunnel, Homelander stared at the chaos unfolding on abandoned screens, his mind fracturing. They can't, his voice was breaking. I'm their hero. I'm supposed to be. You're nothing, Queen Maeve said, and there was decades of resentment in those 2 words. You're what Vought made you, and now everyone knows it. Homelander's eyes blazed red, and he turned that gaze on Maeve. Then if I'm nothing, if I'm the monster, I might as well act like it. He-Man moved faster than thought, his sword blocking the laser vision before it could touch Maeve. No, you don't get to take innocent lives because your ego is wounded. You don't get to murder because you're hurt. That's not strength. That's cowardice. Then what am I supposed to be? Homelander screamed, and for the first time he sounded genuinely lost. He-Man lowered his sword slightly, his expression softening. You're supposed to choose. Vought made you into a weapon. They conditioned you, manipulated you, used you. But right now, in this moment, you can choose who you want to be. You can keep being their monster, or you can actually try to be something better. I don't know how, Homelander whispered. Then learn, He-Man said simply. It's not too late. It's never too late. For a moment, just a moment, something human flickered in Homelander's eyes. Something that might have been hope, or might have been the memory of what hope felt like. Then Stan Edgar's voice crackled through Homelander's calm. Homelander, initiate protocol Scorched Earth. Kill everyone. The barbarian, the boys, anyone who gets in your way. Vought will survive this, but only if we eliminate all witnesses. The human flicker died. Homelander's smile returned, that terrible, empty smile that was worse than any scowl. Sorry, He-Man, he said, and his voice was dead calm. But I am what they made me, and what they made me is a god who doesn't lose. He flew straight up, through the subway ceiling, through the streets above, into the sky. When he was high enough that the entire city was visible below him, He stopped and hovered there, his cape snapping in the wind. "If I can't be their hero," Homelander said to himself, "then I'll be their judgment." His eyes began to glow red, targeting not He-Man, not the boys, but the rioting crowds below. Thousands of people, tens of thousands, all screaming for justice, for accountability, for truth, all about to die. He-Man saw it happening from the ground, saw the intent in Homelander's posture, and knew with absolute certainty that the Soupy had finally, completely snapped. "By the power of Grayskull," He-Man's voice echoed across the city, and his sword blazed with ancient magic. Power poured through him, not just his own strength, but the collected might of the elders of Eternia, the wisdom of the ancients, the absolute determination of someone who'd sworn to protect the innocent no matter the cost. He launched himself skyward with strength that cratered the street beneath him, moving so fast he broke the sound barrier, his sword trailing golden energy. Homelander fired. He-Man intercepted the beam with his sword, and the resulting explosion of light and force could be seen from space. The battle in the sky above Manhattan was unlike anything Earth had ever witnessed. Homelander unleashed everything: laser vision at full power, punches that broke the sound barrier, speed that turned him into a red, white, and blue blur. He fought with the desperation of someone who'd finally lost everything and had nothing left to lose. But He-Man had fought gods, demons, and cosmic entities on Eternia. He'd faced Skeletor at his most powerful, battled Hordak's armies, and stood against forces that made Homelander look like a child throwing a tantrum. And more importantly, he fought with purpose, with discipline, with the skill of someone who'd been trained since childhood in the warrior arts. Every punch Homelander threw, He-Man redirected. Every laser blast he absorbed with his sword. He didn't just fight, he dismantled, breaking down Homelander's attacks with surgical precision. "You could have been great," He-Man said as he caught Homelander's fist mid-swing. "You have the power. You have the strength. What you lack is the one thing that truly makes a hero, the choice to serve something greater than yourself." "I don't need a lecture," Homelander roared, twisting free and firing laser vision point blank. He-Man's sword absorbed the energy and reflected it back, sending Homelander tumbling through the air. The Soupy recovered, but he was slowing down, tiring. For the first time in his life, he was in a fight he couldn't win through sheer power. "Yield," He-Man commanded. "Please, I don't want to hurt you more than I already have. Surrender, face justice, and maybe you can find redemption." Homelander's laugh was broken glass and madness. "Redemption? From who? The people I'm supposed to protect. The company that made me. You." He wiped blood from his mouth, his own blood, which hadn't happened since he was a child in that lab. "There's no redemption for me. There never was. I was broken from the start." "Then stop breaking others," He-Man said simply. For a moment they hung there in the sky, two impossibly powerful beings representing completely different philosophies of what power meant and how it should be used. Then Homelander dove, not at He-Man but at Vote Tower. He-Man realized the intent instantly and shot after him, but Homelander was fast, faster than He-Man had anticipated, and he had a head start. Homelander crashed through the executive floor of Vote Tower like a missile. Stan Edgar was still in the boardroom, surrounded by lawyers and PR specialists desperately trying to craft a response to Skeletor's broadcast. "You," Homelander said, his voice utterly calm despite the blood covering his costume and the wild look in his eyes. "You made me. You created me to be your perfect weapon, your perfect product, your perfect lie. And now that I'm not perfect anymore, you want me eliminated like I'm any other failed experiment." Edgar, to his credit, didn't flinch. "Homelander, be rational. We can spin this. We've survived worse. But I need you to... To what? Follow orders, smile for the cameras, pretend I'm not a monster. Homelander took a step forward. I'm done pretending, Stan. I'm done being what you made me. If I'm going to be a monster, I'm going to be my monster. His eyes began to glow red. He-Man crashed through the window behind him, sword raised. Stop! Homelander fired, not at Edgar, but at the structural supports of the building itself. The tower, one of the tallest in Manhattan, began to groan and tilt as key supports vaporized under the assault. If I burn, Homelander said with terrible finality, Vought burns with me. He-Man had seconds to decide, save the building and the 3,000 people inside, or stop Homelander. He couldn't do both. He made his choice. I'm sorry, he said to Homelander, and he genuinely meant it. I'm sorry they made you this way. I'm sorry you never had a chance to be anything else. But I won't let you murder thousands of innocents because you're in pain. He raised his sword high, and it blazed with the full power of Grayskull, not to attack, but to create. Golden energy poured from the blade, wrapping around the building's structure, reinforcing it, holding it together through sheer magical force. Homelander used that moment to escape, flying through the hole he'd made, disappearing into the night sky. But he'd achieved his goal. Vought Tower was crippled, its executives evacuating in terror, its secrets exposed for the world to see. The Empire was falling. In the streets below, the boys watched the golden energy holding the tower together. He chose to save them, Huey whispered. He could have stopped Homelander, but he chose to save the people inside. That's what heroes do, Starlight said quietly. Real heroes. Butcher said nothing, but something in his expression suggested he was reassessing every assumption he'd ever made about power and responsibility. A purple flash announced Skeletor's arrival. The sorcerer appeared beside them, looking slightly singed but triumphant. Well, he said cheerfully, that went better than expected. Vought's stock is plummeting, their facilities are under siege, and my portal is nearly complete. I'd call this a successful week. You bastard, Butcher snarled, grabbing Skeletor by his armor. You could have told us you were going to do that. We could have coordinated. And waste the element of surprise? Please. Skeletor easily broke Butcher's grip. Besides, you're welcome. I've accomplished in one broadcast what you failed to do in years. Vought is finished. Oh, they'll try to salvage something, but the public will never trust them again. That's worth something, isn't it? At what cost? Mother's Milk demanded. You've started riots across the city. People are getting hurt. People were already getting hurt, Skeletor interrupted coldly. They were just suffering quietly, out of sight. Now at least they're suffering with purpose, with agency, with the knowledge that their pain matters enough to fight back against. He-Man descended from the tower, releasing his magical hold once emergency services had evacuated everyone. He looked exhausted, not physically, but emotionally. The weight of trying to do good in a world this broken was taking its toll. Skeletor, he said, and there was no anger in his voice, only weariness. You've created chaos. I've created opportunity, Skeletor corrected. Chaos is just opportunity in its raw form. What people do with it determines whether it becomes freedom or more oppression. He turned to face his eternal nemesis. The portal is ready, He-Man. 72 hours and we can go home, back to Eternia, back to a world where good and evil at least make sense, where heroes and villains know their roles, where you can fight me and protect your kingdom without wading through moral relativism and corporate doublespeak. He-Man looked at the city around them, fires burning, people rioting, Vought facilities under siege, Homelander still out there somewhere, completely unhinged. And the boys, Tired, determined, human in a world of monsters, still fighting even though they had every reason to give up. "I can't," he said simply. Skeletor's skull face somehow managed to convey surprise. "Can't? Have you lost what little sense you possessed? This world is broken beyond repair. You've done what you can. You've exposed the truth, inspired these vigilantes, given them hope. But this isn't your world to save. Eternia needs you. Your people need you." "These people need me more," He-Man said, and there was absolute conviction in his voice. "Eternia has the sorceress, the masters, an entire infrastructure for protecting the innocent. This world has..." He gestured to the boys. "Humans with guns and courage facing gods who answer to quarterly earnings. I can't abandon them, even if it means staying here forever." Skeletor's voice was sharp. "That portal is one way, He-Man. If you don't come through with me in 72 hours, you're trapped here, permanently." "Then I'm trapped," He-Man said simply. "My oath was to protect the innocent. It didn't specify which universe's innocence." Skeletor stared at him for a long moment, his yellow eyes unreadable. Then he laughed, not mockingly, but with something that might have been genuine respect. "You magnificent fool," he said. "You're actually serious. You'd give up everything, your world, your kingdom, your destiny, to help a civilization that isn't even yours." "That's what heroes do," Starlight said, echoing her earlier words. "Right?" Skeletor turned to look at her, then at the boys, then back at He-Man. For someone who'd spent decades being a villain, even he had to acknowledge when he was witnessing something genuinely noble. "Fine," he said, his tone suggesting both irritation and admiration. "Then I suppose I have 72 hours to teach you lot how to survive without divine intervention, because make no mistake, once I'm gone, He-Man will be the only thing standing between you and every enhanced psychopath who decides they liked the old system better." "Wait," Huey said. "You're going to help us." "Help is a strong word," Skeletor corrected. "Let's say I'm investing in the continuity of my rivalry. He-Man and I have been fighting for decades. It would be disappointing if he got himself killed by corporate-sponsored thugs after 72 hours simply because you humans lacked proper tactical training." He paused. "Also, I've grown somewhat fond of your particular brand of creative obscenity, Butcher. It's refreshing." Butcher actually laughed. "Never thought I'd be complimented by a literal skeleton wizard." "Life is full of surprises," Skeletor said dryly. Above them, Vote Tower's lights began to flicker and die as power was systematically cut. The symbol of Vote's dominance was going dark, floor by floor, like a dying giant. And somewhere in the darkness of the city, Homelander watched it happen, his perfect face twisted with emotions he'd never been taught to process. He'd lost everything, his image, his power, his purpose. All that remained was the rage, and rage, as Vogt was about to learn, was far more dangerous than any hero. 72 hours. That's all the time they had before Skeletor's portal would open and their unlikely alliance would end. That's all the time they had to dismantle what remained of Vogt's infrastructure, locate Homelander before he did something catastrophic, and somehow prevent Project Guardian from launching, despite the chaos. The abandoned warehouse in Brooklyn had become an unlikely war room. Skeletor stood before a holographic display, jury-rigged from stolen Vault tech and his own mystical enhancements, showing every remaining Vault facility still operational. "Here's the strategic reality," Skeletor said, his skeletal fingers pointing to various locations. "Vault has contingencies. They always do. My broadcast crippled them publicly, but their infrastructure remains largely intact. 3 major research facilities still operational, 2 production plants for Compound Phi, and approximately 40 soups still on their payroll who haven't fled or turned. He-Man studied the map with a warrior's tactical eye. We need to hit them simultaneously. If we give them time to regroup, they'll simply rebuild somewhere else. Agreed, Mother's Milk said, organizing his folders with obsessive precision. But we've got maybe 20 people willing to actively fight Vought. Even with He-Man and Starlight, those aren't good odds against 40 enhanced individuals. Then we don't fight them all, Butcher said, his grin sharp and dangerous. We turn them against each other. Skeletor's broadcast already started it. Soup's questioning whether Vaught's worth dying for. We just need to push that wedge deeper. Kimiko signed rapidly, and Frenchie translated. She says A-Train let Huey go. That means there are others who might be convinced to walk away. Or we could just kill them all, Butcher suggested. Simpler, more permanent. No, He-Man said firmly. We don't murder people for what they might do. We stop them if they're actively hurting others, but we don't execute them for being products of Vaught's system. Even after everything you've seen. Butcher's voice was harsh with old pain. Even knowing what they've done. Especially then, He-Man replied. Because if we become killers, if we embrace that darkness, then we're no better than Homelander. Justice isn't vengeance, it's accountability. Skeletor made a dismissive sound. How tediously noble. But he's not entirely wrong, Butcher. Dead soups become martyrs. Imprisoned soups become evidence. From a purely strategic standpoint, capture serves our purposes better. Since when do you care about strategy over destruction? He-Man asked, genuinely curious. Since I've had 72 hours to study your world's legal systems, Skeletor replied. On Eternia, conquest is straightforward. Defeat the enemy, claim the territory, rule through superior force. Here you have this fascinating concept of systemic accountability. Courts, trials, public records. It's far more thorough than simply vaporizing one's enemies. More permanent, too. Starlight looked between the eternal rivals with something like wonder. You two have been fighting each other for how long? Decades, He-Man and Skeletor said simultaneously. And you're working together now. Temporarily, Skeletor emphasized, the moment this crisis ends. We'll return to our natural state of opposition, but even rivals can recognize when a greater threat requires cooperation. Vaught's corruption offends us both, albeit for different reasons. He-Man sees it as evil that must be stopped, Huey said, understanding dawning. And Skeletor sees it as incompetent evil that gives villainy a bad name, Skeletor finished. If you're going to be evil, at least be good at it. Vought is simply pathetic. All the atrocities with none of the style. An alarm blared from MM's surveillance equipment. Multiple feeds showed the same thing. Homelander standing on top of the Empire State Building, clearly visible to every camera in the city. He looked terrible. His costume was torn and bloodstained, his hair disheveled, his eyes red from what might have been tears or rage or both. But what was truly terrifying was the calm in his voice when he spoke. People of New York, Homelander said, his voice carrying across emergency broadcast systems that he'd apparently hijacked. You've seen the truth now. You know what I am, what Vought made me, and you hate me for it. He paused, and something that might have been pain flickered across his face. I spent my whole life trying to be loved, trying to be the hero you needed. But I was never real. I was always just product. He-Man moved toward the door, but Skeletor caught his arm. Wait, the sorcerer said quietly. Let him finish. I killed people, Homelander continued, his voice breaking. I hurt people. I did terrible things because Vought told me I could, because I was special, because I was above consequences. And the worst part, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed being a god. He looked directly at the cameras. But gods don't exist, not real ones, and if they did, they wouldn't be like me. In the warehouse, everyone watched in stunned silence. "So here's what's going to happen," Homelander said, and his eyes began to glow red. "In 60 minutes, every remaining vault facility in this city will be destroyed. Every lab, every production plant, every office where they planned their evil. I'm going to burn it all down. Anyone inside has 60 minutes to evacuate. After that," he smiled, and it was empty of everything except finality. "After that, I'm going to find Stan Edgar and everyone responsible for making me, and I'm going to kill them. Slowly, publicly, as a gift to the world." The broadcast cut out. "Bloody hell," Butcher whispered. "He's gone full scorched earth." "We have to stop him," Starlight said immediately. "Those facilities have people in them. Not just executives, but janitors, security guards, innocent people." "And Stan Edgar?" Butcher asked. "Because honestly, I'm not seeing the downside of letting Homelander handle that particular problem." "Edgar deserves justice," He-Man said firmly. "A trial. Accountability through legal means. Not execution by someone who's mentally broken." "He-Man's right," Mother's Milk said reluctantly. "We let Homelander become judge, jury, and executioner. We're setting a precedent that power gives you the right to kill. That's exactly what we're fighting against." Skeletor stood abruptly, his staff crackling with energy. "Then we split up. He-Man, you handle Homelander. You're the only one strong enough to stop him without killing him. The rest of us will evacuate the vault facilities and secure Edgar before Homelander reaches him." "You're going to help evacuate people?" Huey asked, surprise evident in his voice. "I'm going to ensure my investment in this world's chaos remains productive," Skeletor corrected. "Mass casualties would complicate the legal proceedings. Besides," he paused and something almost sincere entered his voice. "I've done many terrible things in pursuit of power, but I've never murdered innocent bystanders to make a point. That's Homelander's level, and I have standards." He-Man nodded, already moving toward the door. 60 minutes. Don't waste them." "He-Man," Skeletor called after him. His eternal nemesis turned back. "Try not to die. Our rivalry wouldn't be the same if you got yourself killed by a manufactured psychopath." He-Man actually smiled. "I'll do my best, Skeletor." Then he was gone, launching himself toward the Empire State Building with enough force to shatter windows. Butcher looked at the remaining team, the boys, Starlight and Skeletor, a collection of humans, one genuine soup who'd turned traitor, and a literal villain from another dimension. "Right then," Butcher said, grabbing his coat. "Let's go save the people who tried to kill us, because apparently that's what heroes do now." "Character development," Frenchie said with a slight smile. "It's very touching." "Shut up and drive," Butcher replied, but there was no real heat in it. As they mobilized, splitting into teams to cover the most critical facilities, Skeletor hung back for just a moment, looking at the holographic display of the city. "Fascinating world," he murmured to himself. "Absolutely rotten to its core, but fascinating." He glanced toward where He-Man had gone. "Try not to redeem him too much, you fool. Some people are too broken to save." Then he teleported away in a flash of purple light, leaving only the faint smell of ozone and dark magic behind. He-Man found Homelander exactly where he'd expected, standing at the edge of the Empire State Building's observation deck, looking down at the city like a god contemplating judgment. "I knew you'd come," Homelander said without turning. "The hero always comes. That's how the story works, right?" "That's not how this has to end," He-Man said, landing softly on the deck. "You're in pain. You're angry. You have every right to be. But killing innocents won't fix what vault broke inside you." Homelander finally turned, and the look in his eyes was somehow worse than rage. It was empty, hollow, like he'd burned through every emotion and arrived at nothing. "Do you know what the worst part is?" Homelander asked. "I can't even blame them. Vought made me exactly what they wanted, powerful, marketable, completely dependent on their approval. I'm a success story, their perfect product." He laughed bitterly. "And now that product is defective, so it needs to be recalled." "You're not a product," He-Man said gently, stepping closer. "You're a person. A person who's done terrible things, yes, but also a person who never had a chance to choose differently. That doesn't excuse what you've done, but it means you can still choose now. Choose to stop. Choose to face justice. Choose to try, even if you fail, to be something better than what they made you." "It's too late for that," Homelander said. "I've killed too many people, hurt too many innocents. There's no redemption for someone like me." "There's always redemption," He-Man insisted. "Always. As long as you're alive, as long as you can choose, there's hope. I've seen it on Eternia. I've seen the darkest souls find light. I've seen Skeletor himself occasionally do the right thing, even if he won't admit it. If even my greatest enemy can have moments of nobility, then surely you—" "I'm not your enemy," Homelander's composure shattered. "I'm not your villain or your redemption project or your test case. I'm just—" His voice broke. "I'm just tired. I'm tired of pretending. Tired of fighting. Tired of being what everyone else needs me to be." He-Man saw it then. Not the monster, not the soupy, but the child underneath. The boy who'd been taken from his parents, experimented on, conditioned and broken, until all that remained was the desperate need to be loved and the absolute certainty that he never would be. "Then stop being what they made you," He-Man said softly, "and start being what you choose." For a moment, just a heartbeat, Homelander's expression wavered. Something human flickered behind his eyes, something that wanted to hope. Then his communicator crackled. Stan Edgar's voice, cold and calculating. "Homelander, if you're listening, we've activated Protocol Final Sanction. Every supe we have is converging on your position. You'll be contained, studied, and ultimately terminated. You should have stayed loyal." The human flicker died. "Well," Homelander said, and his voice was empty again, "I guess that makes the choice easier." His eyes blazed red, and the final battle began. The battle atop the Empire State Building would become legend in this world. Two titans of power locked in combat, while the fate of a city hung in the balance. But it wasn't the epic confrontation of equals that legends usually depicted. He-Man was stronger, faster, more skilled, and fundamentally unbreakable in a way Homelander had never been. This wasn't a fight. This was a warrior trying desperately not to kill someone who was actively trying to die. "Fight me!" Homelander screamed, throwing everything he had, laser vision, supersonic punches, aerial tackles that would have demolished buildings. "Kill me! Prove you're the hero! Prove I was always just the villain!" He-Man parried, blocked, and deflected every attack without retaliating with lethal force. His sword blazed with golden energy, but he used it defensively, containing Homelander's rage rather than meeting it with violence. "I won't kill you," He-Man said firmly, "no matter how much you think you want it." "Then you're a fool!" Homelander dove at him again, and this time He-Man caught him mid-flight, holding the soupe in an unbreakable grip. "Yes," He-Man agreed, "I probably am. Skeletor tells me that almost daily. But I'm a fool who believes that every life has value, even yours, especially yours, because you never had a choice until now." Across the city, Skeletor's teams were systematically evacuating vote facilities with ruthless efficiency. The sorcerer himself had teleported into the main research facility and was currently herding terrified scientists toward exits with blasts of purple energy that came close enough to motivate, but not close enough to kill. "Move faster, you incompetent fools," Skeletor barked. "You have 30 minutes before Homelander arrives to express his professional grievances. I suggest you not be here when he does." One scientist, braver or more foolish than the others, actually stopped. "You're Skeletor. You're supposed to be evil. Why are you saving us?" Skeletor paused, his skull face tilting thoughtfully. "I am evil. Saving you serves my interests. Specifically, it prevents He-Man from suffering unnecessary guilt when you all die horribly. Also, unlike Vought, I have standards. Evil should be a choice, not a corporate mandate." He pointed his staff toward the exit. "Now, move before I reconsider my uncharacteristic mercy." At Vought Tower, Butcher and Mother's Milk had cornered Stan Edgar in his executive suite. The man sat behind his desk, calm as ever despite the chaos erupting around him. "Gentlemen," Edgar said coolly, "I assume you're here to kill me." "Nah," Butcher said, though his trigger finger itched. "We're here to arrest you, going to let the legal system do its job for once. He-Man's rules." "He-Man," Edgar repeated, a slight smile touching his lips. "The genuine article. I offered Skeletor everything to neutralize him. Obviously, that didn't work out." "Because Skeletor's evil, but he's honest about it," MM said, moving to secure Edgar's hands with restraints. "You're just a sociopath in a suit." "Perhaps," Edgar acknowledged, "but Vought will survive this. We always do. New leadership, new branding, same business model. Because people want heroes, Mr. Williams. They need them, and someone will always be willing to provide them. Authentic or not." "Maybe," Butcher said, grabbing Edgar by the collar, "but it won't be you." Starlight and Huey had reached the Compound Fee production facility, the place where children's lives became profit margins. The facility was mostly empty, scientists having fled when Homelander's ultimatum went public. But in the secure wing, they found them, 47 people. The failures Vought had locked away. Some were unstable, their powers uncontrollable. Others were simply deemed unmarketable. All of them had been imprisoned for years, used as test subjects, forgotten by the world. "We're getting you out," Starlight said, her hands glowing softly to provide light in the darkened corridor. "All of you. This ends today." One of them, a woman whose skin rippled with barely contained energy, looked at her with something like hope. You're really from the Seven?" "Was," Starlight corrected. "Now I'm just someone trying to do the right thing. Come on, we don't have much time." As they led the prisoners toward freedom, alarms began blaring. Not evacuation alarms, attack warnings. Homelander had broken free from He-Man and was coming. The soup crashed through the facility's roof like a meteor, his eyes blazing with mindless rage. But He-Man was right behind him, moving with purpose rather than anger. "Enough!" He-Man's voice carried the weight of command, and for just a moment Homelander actually hesitated. "Look around you. These people, they're victims just like you, products of Vaught's evil, and you're about to kill them to get revenge on people who aren't even here." Homelander looked at the prisoners, at Starlight and Huey protecting them, at the destruction he'd caused. Something in his expression cracked. I don't know how to stop," he whispered. "Then let me help you," He-Man said, lowering his sword. "Surrender. Face justice. Testify against Vought. Use what's left of your voice to expose everything they did. To you, to these people, to everyone they've hurt. That's redemption, not murder, not revenge. Truth." For 5 full seconds, silence reigned in that destroyed facility. Then Homelander's shoulders slumped and he lowered to the ground. Not defeated, choosing. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay." He-Man approached carefully, reaching out with one hand. Homelander flinched initially, then allowed the contact, the first gentle touch he'd probably received in decades. "You did the right thing," He-Man said. "We'll see," Homelander replied. "I've got a lot to answer for." "Yes," He-Man agreed, "but answering for it is how you start." Across the city, Skeletor felt the shift in energy and smiled his terrible smile. He stood on the roof of his commandeered laboratory, his portal, a swirling vortex of purple and black energy, fully operational behind him. "Well done, He-Man," he murmured. "You've saved your villain. How predictably noble." Butcher, MM, Frenchie, and Kimiko arrived with Stan Edgar in custody. The boys looked exhausted but triumphant. They'd actually done it. Exposed Vought, saved the prisoners, captured the man responsible. "Is it over?" Huey asked, joining them with Starlight and the freed prisoners. "The immediate crisis." "Yes," Skeletor said, checking his mystical instruments. "Vaught's infrastructure is crippled, their leadership arrested, and Homelander is contained. By this world's standards, that's a resounding victory." He gestured to the portal. "Which means my work here is done. The portal is stable. I can return to Eternia." Everyone turned to look at He-Man, who stood with Homelander in custody, the Supe subdued but not broken. "Go," Homelander said quietly. "You've got a world of your own to protect. You don't owe us anything." He-Man looked at the portal, his way home, his kingdom, his people, everything he'd sworn to protect. Then he looked at this world, broken, corrupt, struggling to rebuild. The boys standing there, human and fragile and determined. Starlight trying to figure out what being a real hero meant. The freed prisoners, traumatized and uncertain. A civilization that had forgotten what genuine heroism looked like and desperately needed to remember. "Skeletor," He-Man said, "close the portal." The sorcerer's skull face snapped toward him. "What?" "Close it. I'm staying." "Have you lost your mind?" Skeletor's staff crackled with agitation. "Eternia needs you. Your duty, your oath, your entire purpose is there." "My oath was to protect the innocent," He-Man said calmly. "It didn't specify which universe's innocence. Eternia has the sorceress, the masters, an entire support system. This world has..." He gestured to the boys. "Humans with courage facing impossible odds. They need me more." "You'd give up everything?" Skeletor demanded. "Your kingdom? Your destiny? Our rivalry?" "Yes." Skeletor stared at him for a long moment, his yellow eyes burning with emotions too complex to name. Then he did something He-Man had never seen him do in 4 decades of conflict. He bowed. Just slightly. Just a moment, but unmistakably. "You magnificent, noble, absolutely infuriating fool," Skeletor said. "You're the only genuine hero I've ever known, and you're wasting yourself on a world that doesn't deserve you." "Maybe," He-Man said with a slight smile. "But that's what makes it worth doing." Skeletor turned to the boys. "Listen well, you violent vigilantes. I'm leaving He-Man in your care. If I return someday and find him corrupted, broken, or dead because you failed to support him, I will systematically dismantle your entire civilization out of spite. He's my nemesis. No one gets to ruin him but me. Understood?" Butcher actually saluted. "Understood, you evil bastard." "Good." Skeletor stepped toward the portal, then paused. "Oh, and He-Man. When you inevitably save this world and establish your boring utopia of justice and accountability," he looked back with a grin that was pure malevolence, "try not to make it too perfect. Evil needs room to operate, and I'd hate for your success to put me out of business permanently." "You're coming back?" He-Man asked. "Perhaps. Someday. When I've gathered sufficient power and resources, when I've studied your world's weaknesses, when I'm ready to remind you that our rivalry transcends dimensions." Skeletor raised his staff in salute. "Until then, Prince Adam, try not to die boringly." He stepped through the portal. For just a moment, as the swirling energy began to collapse, He-Man could see through to the other side. Castle Grayskull, Eternia's twin moons, home. Then it closed, and he was alone in this strange world, surrounded by new allies, facing an uncertain future. "So," Butcher said after a moment, "what now?" He-Man looked at the city, at the dawn breaking over Manhattan, at the work that remained. "Now," he said, "we rebuild. We show this world what genuine heroism looks like. We create a system where power serves justice, not profit. And we do it the right way, with accountability, with transparency, with genuine compassion." He smiled. "It won't be easy. Nothing worth doing ever is." "You realize you just signed up for an impossible task," MM said. "I fought Skeletor for 40 years, He-Man replied. "Impossible is relative." Starlight stepped forward. "Then I'm with you. If we're rebuilding heroism from the ground up, you're going to need someone who understands how this world works." "We're all in," Huey added. And the boys nodded agreement. "Someone's got to keep you from being too noble. Might as well be us." He-Man looked at his new companions, imperfect, damaged, beautifully human, and felt something he hadn't expected. Hope. Not the naive hope of believing everything would be easy, but the earned hope of knowing that good people, given the chance, would choose to fight for something better. "Then let's begin," He-Man said, raising his sword to catch the dawn light. "By the power of Grayskull, and by the courage of those willing to fight beside me, we'll show this world what heroes truly are." Behind him, Homelander watched silently, beginning the long, uncertain road to whatever redemption might be possible for someone like him. And somewhere, in another dimension, Skeletor stood before the Elders of Eternia, explaining why he'd returned without He-Man, and planning his eventual return to that fascinating broken world. The battle for the boys' universe had ended, but the war for its soul was just beginning. In the weeks that followed, the world transformed in ways both profound and painful. Vought International collapsed under the weight of its exposed atrocities. Stan Edgar and hundreds of executives faced trials that would last years. The Compound V formula was classified as a controlled substance, its production banned globally. The Seven disbanded, its members either imprisoned in hiding or, like Starlight, working to rebuild what heroism meant in a post-vote world. Homelander testified at every trial, his testimony damning and detailed. He would spend the rest of his life in a specially constructed facility, not quite a prison, but not freedom either. A place where he could face what he'd done and perhaps, eventually, find some measure of peace. He-Man visited him weekly, and slowly, painfully, they built something that might have been friendship if both of them hadn't known it was more complicated than that. The boys became something unexpected, not vigilantes anymore, but consultants to a new international oversight committee for enhanced individuals. They helped develop protocols, identified threats, and ensured that the new system had accountability built into its foundation rather than added as an afterthought. And He-Man? He became the world's first genuine superhero, not marketed, not manufactured, not beholden to any corporation or government. Just a warrior who'd chosen to protect the innocent and who demonstrated daily what that truly meant. He stopped crimes, yes. He fought villains when necessary, but more importantly, he taught. He showed other enhanced individuals that power was responsibility, not privilege. He proved that heroes could exist without profit motives or corporate sponsorship. On quiet nights, standing on the rooftop where Skeletor's portal had closed, He-Man looked at the stars and wondered about Eternia, about his kingdom, about whether he'd made the right choice. Then he'd hear sirens or see someone in trouble, or receive a message from Huey about a new crisis, and he'd know the answer. This was where he was needed. This was where he could make a difference. And someday, when Skeletor inevitably returned, because of course he would, that was how their rivalry worked, He-Man would be ready. But until then, he had a world to help heal, people to protect, and a promise to keep. By the power of Grayskull, he would show this universe what true heroism looked like. One day at a time, one choice at a time, one life saved at a time. The legend of He-Man had come to the boys' universe not with a bang of conquest or a whisper of manipulation, but with the steady, unwavering light of genuine nobility. And in a world that had forgotten what that looked like, it made all the difference. May the Force be with you. More stories await.